The scent of sage and memories filled Grandma Rose's Victorian mansion as I pulled into the curved driveway. Cars were already parked everywhere, expensive SUVs and luxury sedans that hadn't been here when Grandma was alive. Just 3 months after her funeral, and they'd already moved in like vultures. I sat in my car for a moment, hand resting on the leather briefcase in my passenger seat. Inside was the document that would shatter their Thanksgiving dinner. Grandma's real will, not the convenient forgery my Aunt Helen had presented to the family. Remember, sweetheart, Grandma had whispered to me 2 weeks before she passed, pressing a small brass key into my palm. The truth is in my study. 3rd drawer down behind the false back. Wait for the right moment. Now, watching my cousins stride around the property like they owned it, I knew that moment had come. Well, look who finally showed up. My cousin Marcus called out as I approached the front door. Didn't think you'd have the nerve to come back after everything. I smiled politely, clutching my briefcase. Wouldn't miss Thanksgiving, Marcus. Grandma always said it was the most important day of the year. He scoffed. Grandma's not here anymore, and soon, neither will you be. Inside, the house felt wrong. Aunt Helen had already started redecorating. Grandma's cherished antique mirrors were gone, replaced by modern art pieces. The Persian rug that had witnessed 50 years of family gatherings had vanished. Even the air smelled different. Designer candles instead of Grandma's signature apple pie. Oh, you came. Aunt Helen's voice cut through the hallway. She stood in the doorway to the living room, martini in hand, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. I thought we made it clear you weren't welcome anymore. You did, I replied calmly. Multiple times. Through your lawyer, through email, and through that lovely eviction notice you taped to my door yesterday. Then why are you here? Because Grandma would have wanted me at her table. One last time. She narrowed her eyes but couldn't argue without seeming cruel in front of the gathered relatives. Fine, but after dinner, we're discussing your departure. Permanently. The dining room was full of familiar faces wearing unfamiliar expressions. Uncle George, who used to slip me $20 bills at Christmas, now couldn't meet my eyes. Cousin Sarah, who'd shared secrets with me during summer sleepovers, sat stiffly in Grandma's chair. My other aunt, Margaret, busied herself with her phone, pretending I didn't exist. I took my seat, the furthest from the head of the table, next to the kitchen door. The same spot they'd put Grandma in her final years, after they decided she was too difficult to deal with. Before we begin, Aunt Helen stood, raising her glass. I want to thank everyone for coming to our first Thanksgiving in our new home. Mother would have wanted the house to stay in the family, and now it has. Several relatives nodded approvingly. They'd all received generous gifts from Aunt Helen after accepting her version of the will without question. And speaking of staying in the family, she continued, her voice hardening as she looked at me. Some people need to understand when it's time to let go. This house belongs to us now. The will was very clear. Was it? I asked quietly, placing my briefcase on the table. The room went silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting with their phones. What's that supposed to mean? Marcus demanded. It means, I said, maintaining my calm, that I find it interesting how quickly everyone accepted a will that wasn't even properly witnessed. A will that contradicted everything Grandma had planned for decades. Aunt Helen's face flushed. How dare you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything. I interrupted, my hand resting on the briefcase. I'm just wondering if anyone bothered to ask why Grandma would suddenly change her entire estate plan 2 weeks before she died, when she was supposedly too confused to make decisions. She was sick, Aunt Margaret chimed in quickly. She wasn't thinking clearly. Really? I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a video I'd recorded the day before she passed. Grandma's voice, clear and strong, filled the room. My darling grandchild, if you're watching this, they've done exactly what we suspected they would. The vultures are circling, thinking I don't see their schemes. But I've prepared for this. The key I gave you, use it when they show their true colors. Aunt Helen's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. That proves nothing, she snapped, but her voice trembled slightly. You're right, I agreed, finally opening my briefcase. But this might. The dining room air grew thick with tension as I pulled out the document. Cream-colored paper with Grandma's distinctive blue ink signature at the bottom. My hands didn't shake. They'd shaken plenty 3 months ago when I'd first found it, but not anymore. What is that? Uncle George's voice cracked slightly. This, I said, carefully unfolding the papers, is Grandma's actual will. Dated 2 months before she died, properly witnessed by Judge Martinez and Dr. Collins, both of whom, by the way, are very much alive and very clear about Grandma's mental state when she signed it. Aunt Helen shot up from her chair. That's impossible. We have the will right here. She rushed to the sideboard drawer, pulling out a document that looked remarkably similar. Ah, yes. I nodded. The convenient will that appeared after Grandma's death. The one that gave you control of everything and divided the rest among everyone who wouldn't ask questions. Tell me, Aunt Helen, did you really think no one would notice the witness signatures were from people who died 5 years ago? Silverware clattered as Cousin Sarah dropped her fork. What is she talking about, Mom? She's lying. Aunt Helen snapped, but her face had gone pale. This is ridiculous. We all know your grandmother wanted. Wanted what? I cut in, my voice sharp. Wanted to give away the house she loved. Wanted to disinherit the grandchild who took care of her for the last 3 years, while you were all too busy to visit. Wanted to reverse every decision she carefully planned for decades. I stood up, pulling out my phone again. Should we call Judge Martinez? He's having dinner with his family, but I'm sure he'd be happy to confirm which will he witnessed. Or maybe Dr. Collins. He was quite upset when he learned someone had forged a will while he was still very much alive to testify. The room erupted in chaos. Cousin Marcus lunged for the papers, but I pulled them back quickly. Careful, I warned. The police have copies, and so does the district attorney's office. Forgery is a serious crime, after all. Police, Aunt Margaret whispered, her face ashen. You went to the police? No, I replied calmly. Judge Martinez did. The moment he learned someone had used a dead person's signature to forge a will he supposedly witnessed. Uncle George stood up, his legs shaking. Helen, what did you do? Aunt Helen's composure finally cracked. I did what Mother should have done. This house belongs in the right hands, not with some sentimental fool who'd preserve it like a museum. The right hands? I laughed softly. You mean the hands that couldn't be bothered to visit her? The hands that were too busy planning renovations while she was still alive? Those right hands. I began reading from the real will. To my beloved grandchild, who showed me true love and care in my final years. I leave my entire estate, including the house at 1242 Maple Grove and all its contents. To those who chose material wealth over family bonds, I leave this lesson. Karma comes for us all. The silence that followed was deafening. You're lying? Marcus sputtered. This is some kind of trick. Would you like to see the video of Grandma signing it? Or perhaps the notarized statements from the witnesses? I have those too. I pulled out more documents. Or maybe you'd like to explain to the police why you all claimed a will was witnessed by people who died years ago. Aunt Helen suddenly lunged for her purse. This is absurd. I'm calling our lawyer. Lawrence Sterling? I asked innocently. He resigned as your counsel this morning. Ethical concerns, he said. Something about not wanting to be involved in estate fraud. The turkey grew cold on the table as reality settled over the room. Children whispered to parents, asking questions no one wanted to answer. Aunt Margaret began quietly crying into her napkin. You have until the end of the weekend to remove your belongings, I said, returning the real will to my briefcase. The locks will be changed on Monday. You can't do this, Aunt Helen hissed. We're family. I turned to her, feeling the weight of Grandma's final words to me. Family isn't about blood, sweetheart. It's about who shows up when it matters. Yes, I replied. We are family. Which is why I'm giving you time to leave with dignity, instead of having the police escort you out now. The grandfather clock in the hallway, one of the few pieces Aunt Helen hadn't dared remove, chimed 7 times. Somewhere in the kitchen, the pies Grandma would have baked were replaced by store-bought imitations, just like the fake Will had tried to replace her real wishes. But truth, like cream, always rises to the top. As evening shadows crept across Grandma's dining room, the family that had gathered for Thanksgiving dinner sat in stunned silence. The revelation of the true Will had shattered more than just their inheritance plans. It had exposed years of lies and manipulation. There's one more thing, I said, reaching into my briefcase one final time. Grandma left individual letters for each of you. The envelopes I pulled out were in Grandma's favorite lavender stationery, each name written in her elegant handwriting. I began distributing them around the table. Aunt Helen's hands trembled as she received hers. More accusations from the grave. No, I replied softly. Grandma called them love with lessons. She wrote them during her last month, when you were all too busy planning her estate to visit. One by one, they opened their letters. The room filled with the sound of rustling paper and muffled sobs as Grandma's final words reached them. Cousin Sarah broke first, tears streaming down her face as she read. She knew I came to the house when everyone was asleep, just to check on her. She thanked me for the secret midnight talks. Of course she knew, I said. Grandma noticed everything, like how Uncle George would leave groceries on the back porch, but was too ashamed to come in after following Aunt Helen's orders to stay away. Uncle George's head snapped up, his letter clutched tightly in his hands. How did she? The same way she knew Aunt Margaret was fighting with her conscience every time she signed another document pushing Grandma out of her own life decisions. I turned to my younger aunt, who was staring at her letter in shock. She forgave you, by the way. She understood the pressure you were under. Marcus stood abruptly, his letter unread. This is emotional manipulation. No, I corrected him. This is the truth you've been running from. The truth about who you all chose to become. I moved to Grandma's chair, her real chair, the one Aunt Helen had banished to the attic. I'd brought it down earlier today, another small act of restoration. Grandma spent her last years watching all of you choose money over memories, renovation plans over relationship repair. She saw you measuring the drapes while she was still sitting in her favorite window seat. but she never stopped hoping you'd remember who you used to be. Aunt Helen, who had been unusually quiet, finally opened her letter. As she read, the color drained from her face. "She knew about the first will, didn't she?" she whispered. The one I changed." I nodded. She knew everything. The forged documents, the secret meetings with contractors, even the plans to turn her rose garden into a parking area. But she wanted to give you a chance to choose differently. By leaving everything to you. Marcus scoffed, but his voice lacked his usual venom. "No," I pulled out one final document. "By leaving everything in trust, with specific conditions." The room went still again. "The house stays intact for 10 years, I explained. "During that time, any family member who wants to reconnect, truly reconnect, not just show up for inheritance claims, is welcome. After 10 years, if genuine change has happened, the trust will be dissolved, and the property divided equally among those who proved family means more than fortune. And you're the judge of that?" Aunt Helen's voice was bitter. "No," I smiled slightly. "Judge Martinez is, along with Dr. Collins and Pastor Roberts, people who knew Grandma's heart and can't be bribed or manipulated." I stood up, looking around the table at the faces of my family, some angry, some ashamed, all shaken. Grandma believed in second chances. She also believed in consequences. This is both. You have 10 years to remember who you were before greed poisoned everything. 10 years to prove that somewhere inside each of you, there's still a trace of the family she loved. The grandfather clock struck 8, its chimes echoing through the silent room. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, covering the property in a clean white blanket. Nature's way offering a fresh start. "The choice is yours now," I said, gathering my things, just like it always was. As I walked toward the door, Aunt Margaret called out, "Where are you going?" I turned back one last time. "To the kitchen. Grandma taught me how to make her apple pie. It's not Thanksgiving without it. Anyone who wants to remember what family really tastes like is welcome to join me." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sarah stood up, wiping her tears. I remember how she taught us to crimp the edges. One by one, others stood. Uncle George, Aunt Margaret, even some of the younger cousins who had only known Grandma through stories. Aunt Helen and Marcus remained seated, their letters crumpled in their hands. "The door is open," I said to them. "For now, just like Grandma would have wanted." In the kitchen, as we began pulling out ingredients and sharing memories, I felt Grandma's presence in every corner. This was her real legacy, not the house, not the money, but the chance for healing she'd orchestrated even after she was gone. The snow continued to fall outside, covering all the old footprints, offering everyone a clean page to write their next chapter. Some would take it, some wouldn't, but at least now, the choice was truly theirs. And somewhere I knew Grandma was smiling.